Thank you, everybody, for attending this Zoom conference during this COVID shutdown time. We wanted to share with you that the Center for American Liberty, together with the Dillon Law Group and our client Andy Ngo, have today filed a lawsuit against Rose City Antifa and a number of individuals who participated in assaults against our client Andy Ngo last year. And this lawsuit is filed in the Multnomah County Court in Oregon, where Portland is located. Briefly, the lawsuit concerns two separate violent outdoor incidents during protests in which coordinated efforts were made to target and attack our client Andy Ngo, a journalist who was in the process of documenting, as is his profession, various types of cultural and social events that take place in Portland. And there is an additional incident in his gymnasium where he exercises, where one of the affiliated individuals assaulted him and attempted to steal his property. The reason that we have waited 11 months from the date of the last incident to file this lawsuit is that throughout this time period, from the beginning of these assaults, we have been in contact with Portland Police Department and even the United States Attorney's Office in Portland and the United States Attorney himself regarding these assaults. In addition, Andy Ngo has been targeted by Antifa members and their allies in other incidents that are mentioned in the lawsuit. And when he reports these incidents to the Portland detectives who are assigned to his matters, he gets worse than zero attention from them, which is really unfortunate because it is the job of law enforcement to keep citizens safe from these types of criminal assaults. Among the charges in this complaint is an Oregon racketeering corrupt organizations charge due to the fact that Antifa and its allies work in coordination with one another to carry out these assaults, not just on Andy, but on other journalists and other individuals who they perceive, rightly or wrongly, as antithetical to their cause of disrupting American society. This lawsuit is particularly timely given what has been happening in the news and evidence in front of most journalists' eyes, which they would acknowledge that there have been violent groups accelerating the unrest in our country that started with protests regarding the death of George Floyd. We seek through this lawsuit to bring justice to Andy, which the criminal authorities and police authorities and U.S. Attorney's Office has not been able or willing to do, and to make sure that other journalists and members of the public are not violently targeted by Antifa, harassed, stalked, and intimidated from carrying out their First Amendment protected activities the way that Antifa and its allies have attempted to do to Andy. It's my privilege to represent a journalist, as I have many times in the past. And what is not important is the journalist's particular viewpoints, but the fact that his activities and the activities of every citizen seeking to comment on matters of public interest are protected, and violence is never acceptable as a counterpoint to those First Amendment activities. So with that, I will turn over the stage to my client, Andy Ngo, who will talk about why he filed this lawsuit, and then we'll take some questions from the press. Thank you. Take it away, Andy.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon. For more than a year, Antifa extremists have subjected my family and I to a campaign of intimidation and terror for my reporting and documentation of their violent extremism as a journalist. It culminated in physical attacks on the 1st of May 2019, followed up by a mob beating and robbery on the 29th of June, which resulted in me being hospitalized with a brain hemorrhage. Both attacks were carried out by masked Antifa militants who did not want me recording the behavior at a public demonstration. The freedom of the press is a cherished right that makes up one of the pillars of our liberal democracy. My family are immigrants to this great country. My parents come from a society that has no free speech, no rule of law. Journalists cannot be cowed by threats and violence by those who are threatened by the truth. In the 11 months since the attack that left me with ongoing neurological and health issues, I have waited patiently for the Portland Police, headed by Police Commissioner and Mayor Ted Wheeler, and the prosecutor's office to carry out justice. It has not happened. Despite giving leads to the Portland Police, not a single arrest has happened. I have received no communication from the Portland Police detectives for months. I actually haven't even heard from them this entire year. Since the attack, promises of violence against me by Antifa extremists and their supporters have intensified, unfortunately. Extremists talk about shooting me, setting me on fire, and making sure they finish a job that they tried to start last June. This is all the while releasing the address and work address of my home and the work location of my family. In October 2019, 6 masked extremists showed up at my parents' home and tried to break into the front door. All these incidents have been reported to local police. Nothing has been done, and no one has been held accountable. Today marks a turning point. Myself and law-abiding citizens across the country can no longer be terrorized by Antifa and far-left extremists with impunity. The current catastrophic violence raging in dozens of American cities is now spreading internationally and demonstrates what I've been warning the public for years through my reporting. Antifa is a violent extremist movement with the training, purpose, and intent of destabilizing this country and overthrowing the Constitution. The cloak of anonymity and the protection of foolish politicians and media have emboldened this movement to carry out unprecedented terror attacks on the American rule of law and American citizens. This must end now.
Thank you, Andy. And it's probably useful before we launch into questions to describe the charges. I touched briefly on one of them, the Oregon Civil RICO statute, but we have several different claims for assault, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, those types of individual tort claims. And among the defendants are Rose City Antifa, a criminal organization, and various individuals who we have been able to identify, as well as several John and Jane Does who remain to be identified. And there are photographs of these individuals in the complaint, some of them. And we hope that through publicizing these efforts, we can perhaps even identify some additional assailants who were involved in these attacks.
Hi, just a quick question. Curious, how do you plan on suing an unincorporated association?
That's a great question. Thank you for that question, Zane. The answer is that the law does provide for methods of service or process on an unincorporated association. Unincorporated associations can actually sue in our court systems, and they can be sued and be served. And so we have identified the processes in Oregon law for doing that, and we're in the process of making arrangements to do that. I think, state the obvious, which is it is difficult to sue a criminal organization, even when you know who some of the members and managers are. That is why we were hoping the police would do their job and arrest these people who have been identified, but they didn't. So now we are going through the difficult task in the civil process of doing that. Thank you for that question. And there is no particular impetus for the timing other than, as a lawyer who is a believer in the criminal justice process, we wanted to give as much time as possible to the authorities because it's really their job to do what we're doing here today. And unfortunately, they did not do their job. And what we learned from a recent election in Portland is that the new prosecutor there is, based on my perception, based on his public comments, not likely to have an interest in prosecuting Antifa and these individual criminal assailants for their actions. Similarly, we were hoping that in light of the Attorney General's announcement recently that Antifa was to be considered a domestic criminal organization, although as the complaint alleges and as we know from other information publicly, it is an international criminal organization, that we might be contacted by the U.S. attorney or see some signs of life in that regard, but we were not. And I will finally add that I'm a lawyer with a big caseload of COVID civil rights litigation that has kept me occupied about 18 hours a day for the last 2.5 months. And so it has actually been something that we plan to file probably a few weeks ago had it not been for the COVID situation. So those are really the reasons why we filed it today.
Yes, my question is, what message do you hope that this sends to people who have also been assaulted or harassed by members of Antifa across the country, and not just in Portland or in the Pacific Northwest, but as this crops up around internationally and across the country, what message do you hope that this is sending to those people as well?
I defer to my client, Andy. Andy, can you take that, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your question, Mr. Jones. As I said in my opening statement, I am hoping that this marks a turning point, that militants belonging to a criminal movement can no longer depend on the anonymity of Black Bloc to get away with their crimes. I am very privileged and fortunate that I've been taken on as a client through the nonprofit that Hamid Dolan has started. And so so many people have rallied behind what has happened to me, and have really pushed for me to pursue justice. So I see my case just not just a fight on an individual level, but because this is going after an actual organization, we hopefully will be able to really expose and bring some light to how criminals are operating in a major American city, and that may potentially provide, hopefully, inspiration, I think, for other Americans around the country who have been victimized by militants belonging to this organization to have precedent to try to seek justice themselves.
Libby actually texted her message in. Libby Emmons' question was, why do you think Portland police weren't investigating?
So actually through my own reporting, I try to figure this out, because long before what happened to me, and unfortunately since after, there's been dozens of law-abiding citizens in Portland who have been viciously brutalized by extremists belonging to various Antifa cells in the city. It's from my understanding with my interviews with sources that the culture of the city being entirely progressive and quite anti-police has provided a chilling environment for law enforcement to actually want to do the work. Policing, unfortunately, has become more politicized, not less, particularly in the aftermath of some of these high-profile cases that have happened elsewhere. And it's made politicians in the local government really come out against police, and come out frequently in defense of Antifa, actually, shockingly. Portland also has a unique political structure in that the mayor, who's very openly left-wing and has never criticized Antifa one time, also serves as the police commissioner. So I think all of these variables coming together has created this environment where criminals essentially are emboldened by others to commit criminal acts, and very few actually get held accountable by the prosecutor's office if they're arrested at all.
And if I can add, what was interesting to me in this case, and in my 27 years of practicing law, I've represented victims of domestic violence, victims of political persecution in foreign countries, and a whole host of different people who have suffered at the hands of powerful people and or criminal actors. And really unique to me that, normally, even if there's a difficulty in prosecuting a criminal, usually you can count on law enforcement to be on your side. What we have found in this particular situation is that We've, I think, been assigned 3+ prosecutors. I've begun to lose count. The detectives have also been reassigned and assigned, and we've now dealt with over half a dozen different point persons, whereas in a normal city criminal prosecution type of a setting, you might have one detective and one lead prosecutor assigned to the case. So I find that very odd and telling and disappointing. So we did give every benefit of the doubt to the Portland authorities. And when I would say the coup de grace is when you have a prosecutor who doesn't believe in prosecution, from what I can tell from some of his public statements. Really, the hope is very limited that the state authorities are going to do anything about this. Now, that leaves the federal authorities, and federal authorities have the right to prosecute criminals who operate across state lines. And as this case unfolds, I think we'll be able to prove that, because we have identified some of the individuals in Antifa as showing up in other states, involved in Antifa rioting in other states. And so that's going to be an important fact in getting any involvement or attention going forward from the federal criminal authorities. But at the end of the day, an individual who assaults a person and causes damage, and including lasting damage to Andy, they're liable for that. And whether they're living under a bridge, as apparently one of these individuals is, or whether they're living with their parents, or whether they're living on their own, they have obligations if they're adults under the law, and we intend to find them and hold them liable.
Question from Donald Thompson from the Associated Press. He asks, can you respond to the difficulty in serving the individuals, including one who may be living under a bridge?
Well, yes, it is difficult. And if it were easy, perhaps, law enforcement would have done its job earlier, although I have my doubts for the reasons that I stated. One of these individuals who's named in the complaint actually has a job. He has a LinkedIn profile, and he holds a position of some importance, I would think, in our lives. Another individual who not named in our complaint, but who's been identified in other sources as part of Antifa, works as a bartender. There are people with jobs, people with day jobs, who then put on masks and commit these criminal acts in a permissive environment in Portland. And so while it is difficult, I have reason to believe that with the exposure of what they've been doing more recently, there may be some people who were previously involved or allied with Antifa who may have second thoughts about that, and how there are perhaps idealistic reasons for joining this movement, only to find that it is in fact a criminal enterprise and a violent movement. They may reconsider, they may share information with us privately. We would certainly welcome that. If anybody has information about any of the individuals described in our complaint, they can message us, if it ideally with information that we can use to identify where to find these people and where to serve them. That would be very helpful, and that would be a good act of a citizen. It is the job of every citizen to cooperate with the authorities.
I'm seeing some comments, reactions to this story already, people talking about discovery and things like that. Is that something you're planning on taking this lawsuit to that stage? And, it can be kind of, I'm just curious, is that really where you see this lawsuit going? Because that's what people are talking about and what they seem to be anticipating.
Every lawyer who files a lawsuit in court has a duty to only file that lawsuit if they intend to use that lawsuit for the proper purposes. And to me, the proper purpose here of this lawsuit is to serve every single individual and identify every John or Jane Doe individual, serve them with a discovery after they're served with the lawsuit, after they answer the complaint, take discovery from them, take their depositions, take discovery from third parties, including individuals who are named in this complaint but not named as defendants, and then have a trial, hold them liable. If they want to settle the case and give us information, or agree to cease and desist their illegal conduct, we would certainly be open to that, but that would be premature. But certainly our intention is to serve every single individual and then serve them with a discovery, and then get to the bottom of these individual claims. And I will also tell you that if in the course of that discovery process identify additional individuals, we will name them as the does who are listed in the complaint. We can amend the complaint to add additional charges and claims as well. And we have every intention of doing that, just as we do in any other case. And so that's my intention with this lawsuit. So I want to thank everybody for their time and attention to this issue. Many people have expressed concern and support for Andy, and I want to bring this back to the fact that over the years, I've represented a lot of journalists, including liberal journalists, journalists with no particular viewpoint. It is important as a civil rights activist and a First Amendment lawyer that we allow all voices to be heard, and that includes all the journalists who are on this call and have their own viewpoints. And it is never okay for violence from any quarter to intimidate a journalist or a citizen who wants to express their First Amendment views. And so that's really the purpose of this lawsuit. That's why our Center for American Liberty is involved in it. And we look forward through this lawsuit process to bringing some of these people, if not all of them, accountable, and making sure that we have a freer and more open exchange in a nonviolent manner in Portland and indeed throughout other cities in the United States, including some that have been affected by leaders of Rose City Antifa who've traveled to adjoining states and even other parts of the country to commit their mayhem and violence or organize it or direct it. So thank you all for your attention. And certainly as this lawsuit progresses and any milestones occur, we'll certainly keep the public apprised of those developments, which are, we believe, in the matter of the public interest. Thank you.